Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is April 28th, YC127, and this is the Eve Universe Show! Hopefully that worked. All right, how's it going, guys? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Is everything good? Everything is good. All right, so, welcome, guys. So sorry I didn't stream on Friday or get much done this weekend. I'm just going to say, like, oh, it's been a nightmare. My phone was stolen on Thursday, and I've been pretty well obsessed with that fact for the rest of the time. And I just found out that it's going to be difficult to replace, and it's just been a giant nightmare. So yeah, I don't even know how, because like, I didn't go anywhere where I had my phone out. It's just that afternoon, it was not in my house. And my tracker was saying it was at the local Walmart, which was literally in the opposite direction of anywhere I went. And then today, it finally moved to like the other side of town. So I'm pretty sure it's gone now. I don't know what I did to piss off who, but yeah, so between that and everything else, just trying to adjust, you know, my like living on my own now again and all that stuff. But either way, I apologize. You know, if you want to support the stream, that'd be helpful. But otherwise, let's jump into today's stuff because we have lots of stuff to cover. The FanFest stuff, we're going to talk about all that stuff. We're going to talk about FanFest. We're going to talk about what's going on right now with the crisis, etc., etc. So let's go ahead and jump in on a update on the crisis itself, starting with the New Eden news. Drifter battles turn around as Deathless threatens Warden Connections. Drifter wormhole occupiers resurgent. Inside Drifter wormholes, occupying factions have taken advantage of new research insights to unlock greater influence. This influence allows them to establish further control over the Drifter wormhole systems. Thanks to these insights, all 5 factions, Amar Empire, Kaldari State, Edencom, Mimitar Republic, and the Triglavian Collective, have experienced greater gains from their activities within Drifter space. Despite incredible efforts by Capsuleers, the early limitations of experimental technologies led to losses in influence across the board. Now that trend has been reversed. Triglavian loyalists were the fastest to take advantage of the influence change. They quickly secured control of the Azaja redoubt and have claimed the most victories over Tyrannos Strategos Dreadnought inside of their nexus point. The Amar Navy has also experienced great success, dominating Sanctified Vedette. In the Sentinel MZ, Edencom has managed to put an end to the Vigilant Tyrannos' control. The Mimitar have also seen significant gains, though they still have some work to do before they can re-establish control over liberated Barbican. While the Kaldari are struggling the most in Conflicts Irie, their efforts have begun to bear fruit, and they're on course to re-establish themselves. SOCT suggests Deathless prepares to shut down Warden Connections. The Society of Conscious Thought has shared hyperspace telemetry data showing traffic originating at the Warden in Zarzak and linking to the Drifter wormhole strongholds in all 5 occupying factions. Recent influence improvements have only increased that traffic. Furthermore, according to SOCT, these same links also exist between the Warden and Drifter-controlled Nexus Point sites. When asked what connection the Warden may have to the Drifter's sudden advancement in the structures within their Nexus after years of dormancy, the SOCT declined to comment. The Warden was first revealed following the Drifter's attempt to hack Deathless-controlled Zarzak. The Deathless Circle has been delivering cryptic warnings since the attack on Tabitzer via hacked Upwell Consortium advertisements. The Scope has been unable to communicate directly with the Circle or its representatives, but a communication from the Deathless himself was delivered to our offices. The storm has broken. Lightning strikes 5 points, but it is the thunder that you should fear. The hubris of empires has corrupted our Warden, but not as deeply as the tyrant's grasp. All must be purged for the path to be restored. We toil now to clean this mantle of the unworthy. We must freeze the 5 fingers of tyranny in place before they form a grip around that which is not theirs to claim. The cryptic missive was dismissed by the Amar, Mimitar, Kaldari, and Edencom representatives as the ranting of a criminal madman. No response has been forthcoming from the Triglavians. Inside Zarzak, there are reports of a new scientific team being assigned to the Warden. SOCT CEO Idme Sphere suspects that they are attempts by the Deathless Circle to put an end to Drifter wormhole filament access, just as they did with the harmonics gathered from Tabitzer. SOCT CEO Idme Sphere has, however, suggested that, quote, while the people of New Eden did not choose to place their trust in the society, we must now all place our hopes on those forces they have chosen. It is critical that the firm footholds are established in the Drifter wormholes before the Deathless Circle completes its work, or worse, the Drifters complete theirs. News in brief. Chairman Saraki calls accusations of communications between the state and known Kybernauts as unfounded conspiracy. SOE maintains coordinated research across Drifter wormholes despite new occupiers. Abyssal observatories report deep flow energy levels dropping for first time in over a year since Trig's secure redoubt. Reports of proving trials to open communication channels with counter-domain fleet confirmed by SOE agents. Upwell Consortium hires new information security team with goal of setting industry standard. Suvio Belleron courts controversy by criticizing Galente election postponement in interview. And that is it for your New Eden news on the... this is from April 26th, YC127. Now, some analysis. So, what we're seeing here is the consequence of a pretty significant change that was done in the Drifter wormholes. So, as we all know at this point, there was an event in which people could align themselves with one of 10 different factions in order to help advance their efforts against the Drifter forces. And then the next event, which started a little over 2 weeks ago, I think now, involved those very factions, at least the 10 that succeeded in that challenge. The Amar, Kaldari, Edencom, Mimitar, and Triglavian Collective have each chosen their own wormhole, one of the 5 Drifter wormholes, and they were able to make influence efforts. So each of the wormholes started at 90% influence, but then rapidly began to decay. And the reason why this is... So there's this like the hardest site in this event. So you've got sites that are throughout New Eden, right? The combat site and the hacking site and all that stuff. And those give you the blueprints to make the filaments and the doodads required in those wormholes. So the 5 filaments lead to the 5 Drifter wormholes. It's the first time that we've ever had a filament that goes to one specific spot. And of course, this is saying that they're using the Warden coordination system, the Warden's massive calculations and ability to access advanced spacetime in order to make those calculations, to make these filaments target a very specific system, in which case it's one of those 5 Drifter wormholes, right? So originally, the decay was so much, so like each of the teams started at 90%, but it was very clear that it would be almost impossible to keep it up. So the decay rate of the system was about 2 to 3% every hour, no matter what. And completion of the hardest site in the game, hardest site in the event, which is the fighting of the Drifter battleship, Dreadnought. That takes at least 15 people, and a single time running it gave you about 2 to 3%. So, in essence, if you were wanting to try to win in the original system, you would have to be running more than one of these Nexus sites every single hour just to keep it even, right? And the worst part about it is there's a second site called the Labyrinth, which is in these systems, which are these giant mazes, which are actual shifting mazes. So there's no way for players to master them or get it right or anything like that. It's just a matter of having to go and explore them until you figure them out. So it takes a fleet of about 10 to 15 people, about 45 minutes to successfully complete one labyrinth. And that one labyrinth gives you 1 Nexus key. So in essence, if you would have wanted to win on that first week, you would have had to have 2 fleets, at least 15 man each, one that's doing nothing but constantly running the labyrinth in order to get you Nexus keys, and another that's constantly running Nexus keys, or Nexus, using those keys in order to work on influence. This is ridiculous, and thus influence completely collapsed across the board, to the point where it became a risk of what happens when the drifters get it to 0% influence. And that did happen. And eventually we found out that once it gets below a certain point, I think it was 20%, then the drifters begin to attack more and more and more within the system. And then once you get above 30%, that starts to cut off. But we really didn't have to worry about that too much, because at about the same time that we found that out, they also changed the rules. So they made it, there's a few things that they did. One, they made it so that decay was slower. So now you have to run less Nexus sites. 2, they made it so that the labyrinth gives 3 keys instead of 1, which makes it significantly easier to farm enough keys to be able to run enough Nexus sites in order to make effort. But then also 3, they made it so that the labyrinth sites, completing the labyrinth sites, also controlled influence. So these three changes were significant enough that the Triglavians managed to successfully complete their wormhole in about 24 hours after these changes, becoming, as this news article posts, the first of the 5 empires to complete their task. Now, it's worth remembering that 25%, remember there are 10 different factions in the original set, 25% of all points acquired during Phase 1 was acquired by the Triglavian Collective. They vastly beat out their other opponents in this effort. However, this also means, also, the Triglavians had the easiest wormhole for completion, right? Each of the Drifter wormholes has a different weather system. And it just so happens that the Triglavians have the weather system that is specialized for armor ships with small weapon systems, right? Which ironically, not ironically, but like obviously is how Triglavians like to fight, right? And so this ended up being extremely effective wormhole for for Kikimoras, Draugrs, and such, to be able to be highly effective, even in the Dreadnought site, etc. So the Triglavians had an easier time of their challenge than the other empires. That is true. However, it's also worth noting that they also effectively would get first pick because they won the race. Each of the other empires picked holes that are somewhat valuable to them. The most controversial, of course, is the Kaldari got the Conflicts Aerie, which is good for Kaldari. It's good for ships or shields, but it's not really good for the strategies that people were using against the against the drifters. So the Kaldari have also had basically been struggling the most, right? So that's kind of the practicality of it all. If we open up the opportunities window and we go to interstellar events, we can see actually now, wait, huh? Wait, the Triglavians lost their control? Wait, the Triglavians lost their control? That's true. You would need 2 lab fleets to be able to keep up with how fast the... Wait, the Triglavians lost their control? Wait, hold on. This is... If anything, this is breaking news. Hold on. Is this an error? That's so weird. Okay, either way, we're gonna get back to that. But in the meantime, we can see that the Azdaja Redoubt, the Sanctified Vedette, and the Sentinel MZ have all been completed. Although oddly enough, the Azdaja Redoubt fell again. Which is weird because, like, the check mark seems to imply that it would be done. Either way, the point is that we now have the Liberated Barbican, which is the Mimitar one, and the Conflicts Irie, which is the Kaldari one, that still need to be completed. Okay, so the decay continues. So you guys are going to have to keep pushing it up. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. Okay, that's cool. That's crazy. I wonder if it can go above 100%, because if it sticks at 100%, then as soon as it decays at all, it would decay out of 100%. So I assume that you'll be able to push it up above 100%. I don't know if anybody knows the rules for that now. This is, like, seriously, didn't even know this was possible until right this second. So there's also a lot of questions about why the Kaldari State have not been that effective. Now, you know, obviously I've talked a lot about how the Kaldari are super effective at almost every single event that they touch, right? The Kaldari have, you know, during the Stargate building event, they managed to not only build their Stargate, but they managed to shut out the Galente. During Shadow Wars, they managed to complete their entire thing before anybody else even completed a single stage. The Kaldari have been an incredibly effective force when it comes to completing events. However, this is mostly focused on their faction warfare group, right? And there's a few reasons why the state has so much support historically. First of all, they have a couple of really, really strong RP groups and RP individuals. And those RP people are significantly financially, like, well off, partially because of the fact that they've been in Kaldari for a long time, or Calmil for a while. They're traders, but also, as Pandemic just pointed out, the Kaldari State has Jeta, right? And so the Kaldari has always been kind of the PvE empire. And even in faction warfare, it's always been true that the Kaldari had more people, while the Galente usually had more fiercer combat pilots. And that's kind of been the balance. Now, obviously, for the last few years, the balance has been kind of pushed in the favor of the Kaldari. We've talked about this many, many times. But what's going on here? The problem is that in almost every single example that I have given in the past about the Kaldari being effective, they have always been in the context of faction warfare or in PvE or other activities that can be done in known space in Kaldari space, right? So if you have sites that are just everywhere in the Empire, there will be more sites being run in Kaldari space than anywhere else, which means that there's going to be more people who support Kaldari. Not everybody who lives in Kaldari space support Kaldari, but it makes sense that there's going to be a larger percentage of people that support the Kaldari that also live in Kaldari space. So in all of these examples, we see that, like, the Abazon the Abazon Gate. Was that Abazon? Shoot, no. What was the Stargate that we built? That they built? Fuck. Othanoon. The Othanoon Gate. The faction warfare in general, and a lot of these things, like, these are in the context of the faction warfare stuff and in Kaldari high-sec stuff. So the people can do it where they already are doing it. The reason why they do so effectively is because they are leveraging human behavior, right? People are already doing it this way. People are already supporting the Kaldari militia because it lets them keep Jeta. People are already doing stuff in Kaldari space, etc. And so this has allowed them to be successful. This is requiring them to go somewhere else to do things on behalf of the state. So instead of, like, so now only the people that are willing to go out of their way to help make it possible are the ones that are being able to actually do this. And the thing is that given the fact that the Kaldari State's forces are so motivated by money, the event itself would have to be valuable. Also, the Kaldari are historically actually really bad at, like, teaming up to do a cooperative effort. They're really good when individuals can do stuff to collect together to a collective goal, right? Like, for instance, with the Othnian Gate, each individual could go out and mine and turn in ore. Collectively, they were able to win. In this case, they had to form fleets and work together for things that had very, very little intrinsic reward. So it's a very different kind of challenge for the state. And as we see, that has caused them to kind of collapse. Meanwhile, the Triglavians have spent the last 5 years almost sitting in Pochfin, figuring out how to work together while fighting with each other, all obsessed with the Triglavian collective, their efforts, their motivations, and wanting to support the Triglavian collective by any means necessary, right? To the point where they're living in Pochfin and doing all this stuff. There's not a real big intrinsic reward. Now, obviously, you can run the big sites if you want to, but those big sites require coordination. So these guys have been learning to work together. And furthermore, I mean, the entire Triglavian collective kind of came together in this ad hoc way during invasions. So when this started, the Triglavian collective just snapped right into gear. They had their Discord up within a day. They're sitting there coordinating. The same leadership, the same people that took charge and did FCing back in invasion started to step up again. And so instantly we start seeing fleets for the Trig start to go together, figuring things out and getting stuff happening. That's why the Triglavians have been the most effective. So what's interesting now is we actually see a schism within the Triglavian collective. This is one of the things I always have loved about the Triglavians, is that somehow the Triglavians always manage to force their players, trick their players into fighting like Triglavians, right? Not only does the Asdaja Redoubt really support fighting as a Triglavian with Triglavian ships, Kikimoras with remote reps, etc., which is a very Triglavian way of doing things. But also, like, there is now a almost cladistic dichotomy growing within the Triglavian collective. Now that they have completed the Asdaja Redoubt, since the message from the Triglavians was that all previous considerations and hostilities must be set aside for the purposes of extirpating the ancient enemy Asdaja, we actually see a small contingent within the Triglavian collective supporters that are actually saying that they now that they've completed their site, they need to go and help the other empires, including Edencom, right? Because if you think about, like, it doesn't matter if it's supporting the Kaldari. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? And so we see there are certain people, I know for a fact, within the Triglavian collective that are trying to rally support for the other wormholes, including the Conflicts Eerie. So hopefully we're going to see more progress there that way. I find this fascinating because the Triglavian collective members are not unified in this, but in kind of the Triglavian way, they're allowing those who believe this way to do it their way, and those who don't believe that to work against it or just to ignore it. And then, the proving will commence. Whichever ideology ends up being successful will be the one that advances. That's how the Triglavians do this. It's the dialectics of the concrete. This is the proving in action through the humans that participate in the Triglavian collective. I think this is awesome. You have a fun IC statement? If you DM me it, I can pull up your statement. Glorification of the fit. It does seem like effort has flown down from the Trigs to others, especially seeing as how the redoubt is failing now. Well, again, like, this is 96%, so, like, it could very well be that we just figured out that these things could tick down at all. Oh, we have an official statement on the matter from Sias, who is a long-term Triglavian supporter. I'm not going to pull up the Discord right now, but I will read it for you. They say, we are Kybernauts. We speak with the consent of the Kybernaut clade assembled in communion militant against the ancient enemy Asdaja. You know, I gotta say, before we go any further, I really, really respect... There are people that have gone out of their ways to be able to, like, write like a Triglavian, and I approve. Like, this makes total sense so far. It would be interesting if certain officer mods were locked behind different faction holds. Well, there are different rewards that are locked between different faction holds, but you don't actually have to gain the doodad in that hole to turn it in. It is falling, not failing. That's true. Hopefully CCP will get the hint that we really like the trigs. I know, right? All right. So, selection of Asdaja readout realizes profound communion amongst Kybernauts and the convocation. Dominance power pattern proceeds towards glorification. We submit the following discourse elements in reflective communion of the convocation of Triglav outside of the struggle. Extirpation of the ancient enemy Asdaja within Asdaja readout remains constant priority. Edencom seeks to obstruct and mortify collective flow in advancing time. Countervailing imperatives of destruction mortification are extended. Noema of dominance patterns and other hive domains remain consent locked. Paramount Kybernauts of Daz Clade evokes Noema of proving of augmented Neurodnia under Empire Polities. Kybernauts in playful communion with Empire Polities rebuke Noema of proving and invoke priority directives of extirpation of the ancient enemy Asdaja. Procession flow of deathless entities remains unproven. Corrupt dominance arrangements under Fulcrum indicated in reverse time data flow. Advanced time obstruction of dominance patterns expected. All obstructions shall be mortified. Glorification awaits. So what this seems to be saying is, like, this is literally saying what I just said, which is that, like, their absolute highest paramount requirement is to secure and control the Asdaja readout. However, the plan, the policy of whether or not they should influence the other wormholes remains consent locked, which means they're not in they haven't come to a unifying decision. So they're saying that there are augmented Neurodnia under Empire Polities, Kybernauts in playful communities. So Kybernauts that are working with those Empire Polities rebuke the concept of proving and invoke priority directive of extirpation of ancient enemy. So they're saying, hey, this isn't about, like, proving that we're better than Edencom right now. This is about destroying the drifters. And so that is basically where they're at right now. And I would like to remind everybody, what I just read, this is player lore, right? These are players responding to what is going on. And if you really, like, Sias has always been exceptional when it comes to these sorts of things. They did also post it in Triglavian script. So this would translate to what I just read. So congratulations to the Triglavians. They are badass. So that explains at least this much, right? Now, the liberated... So what's interesting here is, the other thing I would like to point out about this is that I think that part of the reason why with the liberated Barbican, I wonder how easily ChatGPT would translate to Triglavian. That would be... I don't think ChatGPT would do it correctly. You have to know how they talk. So the problem, Sargon, is that this doesn't have anything to do with Edencom fortresses or minor victories. So they don't see that value at all. This is only about these wormhole systems. So, okay. The other thing that's interesting about this that we haven't really talked about is the Mimitar one, right? The liberated Barbican is also not complete. However, we have historically always seen, like with the Triglavian invasion, the Mimitar were the most effective at not only stopping the invasion, but the Mimitar guys did something really, really interesting at the time, for a long time, which was that they didn't really trust Edencom either. And so there is a less known fact, which is that if neither side was able to progress within, I think it was 3 days, then the invasion would just end without either side winning. And the Mimitar fleet supporters actually caused that to happen more than anything else, which is why we see very few minor victories or fortresses or Potvin systems that came from Mimitar space. And so the Mimitar it's another one of those examples where the Mimitar have always shown themselves to be highly, highly, highly effective when it comes to their supporters, right? The Mimitar RPers and the fleets that involve them have always been really strong. However, what's weird about this, what I think is happening here, and this is speculation, is that I think that the Mimitar people, the fleets that support Mimitar also often support the empires in general, right? So you've got fleets like, oh God, now I can't remember their name. But some of the major alliances that have supported Mimitar historically also support Edencom. So I suspect that part of what's happened here is that the Mimitar support has been split between the Mimitar and Edencom. And that's one of the reasons why the Mimitar has been lagging behind. Although, as you can see, the Mimitar are still doing better than the Kaldari. So, yeah, this is just interesting, some stuff to look at. Remember, we still have a few more days. We have about another week. Yeah, Electus Matari, thank you so much, Brave. Yes, Electus Matari is one of the biggest supporters of the Mimitar, outside of like Urshikon or whatever. But they also have been extreme supporters of Edencom. So the question is, I wonder whether or not there was a shift in focus or a split in focus between those who might support the Mimitar and those who would support Edencom, right? And it makes sense that like Edencom would be those who support the Mimitar and others, with of course the empire that would support themselves over the other empires the most being the Amar, which happened to be successful. So there's also a conference or whatever at FanFest that might influence the outcomes. I mean, yes, so that is the big thing that is worth noting right now, which is that this right now is the week before FanFest. And this huge event doesn't end until after FanFest. In fact, just to remind everybody what the timeline of this looks like, right now is the 28th, which is Monday, right? And then, so then the 2nd through the 4th, I think it is FanFest. The 6th, which is not tomorrow, but Tuesday after tomorrow, is when the Drifters are supposed to attack. May 1st is the conference. Okay. And then the event itself doesn't end until I think the 14th. I still think Upwell has a shot. 15th. So it goes until the 15th, which would mean that it includes the 14th. So it goes for another week after the climax of the event. So CCP has something planned, but we don't actually know what it is. What we do know is, so like that's kind of the timeline of how this is going to be. So this is the week before everything kind of happens. It's the last week for us to kind of do our influence before the shit hits the fan. So yeah. Going back to the New Eden news. The other question that we have is about the Deathless shutting down the Warden connections. You know, there's... this is a tricky one. Because on the one hand, the Deathless shutting down the Warden connections seems to be a direct strike against the 5 empires that are attempting to take over the Drifter wormholes. However, it doesn't, just reading this, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily like, oh, I'm mad at them or whatever. It's more about the fact that I think that the Deathless believes that what the empires are doing with their Warden connections is reckless, okay? And I think that a lot of this has to do with the fact that the Nexus has been completing. You know, the Nexus used to have pickup sticks, like they were all scattered around, but now the pickup sticks have started to align almost like a gate. And so one of the theories is that these are aligning towards Zarzak, right? If we go back to that news article, we see that it says the same links also exist between the Warden and the Drifter-controlled Nexus Point sites. So there are hyperspace telemetry data showing traffic originating in the Warden and Zarzak and linking to the Drifter wormhole strongholds of all 5 occupying factions. Recent influence improvements have only increased that traffic. Furthermore, according to the SSCT, these same links also exist between the Warden and Drifter-controlled Nexus Point sites. So if you assume that these are all aligning, or if this traffic is those filaments being routed, like that's those connections, and that's why they've increased in traffic. However, none of those filaments lead to the Nexus Point site. So the fact that there are links between the Nexus site and the Warden makes me suspect that the Drifters are actually counter-hacking these connections. You realize that the Drifters have incredibly much more technology than us when it comes to space-time manipulation, the creation of wormholes, the understanding of space-time topology, all that shit. So it could very well be that as we are using filaments to get into the Drifter wormhole, that is allowing the Drifters to kind of route their way back into the Warden, which, if we remember from like a year ago, is exactly why or what the Drifters have been trying to do for quite some time. So there is a fear that what the Drifters are aligning their gates to is Zarzak or the Warden. So that could be bad. It could also well be that they are aligning to the 5 points of attack from the attack plans that we saw from the Drifters before, which could see us having Jeta 4-4 attacked among other places like Luminaire and Paytor. So these are two possibilities that could be happening. But if you look at this, like, you know, based on his cryptic message is really confusing to me. So again, to just read it, the storm has broken. So like, this is, he's been saying stuff about the storm, and that's the coming of the Drifters and all this stuff. The lightning strikes 5 points. So if the lightning strikes 5 points, we can assume that given the context of what he's saying, he's actually talking about the 5 Drifter wormholes being attacked, right? So the lightning strikes 5 points would be the Empires attacking the 5 Drifter wormholes. But it is the thunder that you should fear. Now, the relationship between that, like the thunder would be the sound of the lightning, the consequence of the lightning, right? And so I feel like the implication here is it's like, well, yeah, the Empires are attacking the 5 Drifter wormholes, but it is the reverberations of that attack that is the real problem. The hubris of the Empires have corrupted our Warden, because the Empires have hacked into the Warden and are now using it to strike into the wormholes, but not as deeply as the Tyrants grasp. Now, so the Empires are versus the Tyrants. The Tyrants are the Drifters, because each of them are like the Tyrannos. They claim the title of the Tyrants, which were the leaders of the Second Jovian Empire. All must be purged for the path to be restored. So the corruption of the Empires and the corruption of the Drifters within the Warden must be purged. We toil now to clean the mantle of the unworthy. We must freeze the 5 fingers of tyranny in place before they form a grip around that which is not theirs to claim. So here's my big question here. Which 5 fingers are they talking about, right? Because like through the majority of this the topic of this block of text is the lightning strikes of 5 points, hubris of the empires. So you would expect that the 5 fingers that they're talking about here would be those 5 strikes. However, they refer to the tyrant's grasp, which is a reference to a hand versus fingers, and they refer to tyranny. So what they're saying is, what I think that they're saying is that the empire's attempts to attack the drifters are causing the tyrant's hands to close, the 5 fingers to close in, so that way they can grab a grip on that which is not theirs to claim. So they could be talking about the empires not like the drifter wormholes not being the empire's right to claim, but it does seem to imply that they're talking about whatever it is that the drifters are about to do is going to be attempting to claim that which is not theirs to claim. So I'm sorry I don't have any solid answers for you. This is pretty intentionally vague, but that's my thoughts on the matter. And let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments down below. Who knows? Maybe we'll reference it when all of this is over and see who's right. Now then, in the news in brief, Chairman Saraki calls accusations of communication between the state and unknown cybernauts as unfounded conspiracy. I have been in contact with some people who will remain anonymous that have indicated that there is a certain, like, this seems to indicate what I was talking about before, which is that there are those within the pro-Triglavian movement who are actively working with pro-Kaldari forces, players, in trying to help with the conflicts IRI. There is actually one more thing that's kind of weird about the conflicts IRI, which is that, in theory, the conflicts IRI should be the easiest wormhole to get into. Their filaments should be the cheapest because it's the only wormhole that isn't involved in the tourism method of completing the event track. Which, if you guys don't know, like, I posted a video last week about the most straightforward, risk-free, foolproof method to complete the event. We had several people in chat this morning at the very beginning talking about how they successfully were able to complete that with like 10 plus people at a time. And the only complaint that people have is that it's boring because it's so straightforward. You cannot be stopped. It's just a matter of buying enough filaments, which in and of itself is odd that they're not included. It is odd that they're not included. That's true, Havoc. It's also odd, at the very least, that they didn't, like, change it at some point. Like, they could have at any time patched it so that way, if for some reason it had to be 4, they could have patched it to, like, rotate it to a different one if they'd wanted to. But either way, the point is that, yeah, I think that the Sig Radius Bloom... So, basically, it's just that the Complex IRI is the hardest one to fight the drifters in without taking losses. That's a big piece of this. So, anywho, but it is also worth noting that tourism itself doesn't actually help or hinder with influence. It just makes it so that the filaments are going to be more expensive for the wormholes that are involved in that tourism. So, either way, SOE maintains coordinated research across drifter wormholes despite new occupiers. That's just a reference to the fact that there are SOCT flotillas in the various wormhole systems, which, by the way, for those of you who are operating in these wormhole systems, it's worth noting that the SOE site is both gateless and dead space, which means if you warp to, and also, I believe it's still true, it used to be true, I think it's still true, that the SOE flotilla is the only site in a drifter wormhole in which the drifters, the roaming drifters, do not warp to. Isn't that a reference? I think it's run by the SOE universe. No, well, no, because so maintains coordinated research. They have a drifter. They have a SOE flotilla in every single drifter wormhole for research purposes, and have since the beginning of the drifter wormholes. So, but my point is that drifter flotilla mechanically is the one place in a drifter wormhole that the drifters do not warp to. So, if for some reason you have to go AFK, one of the safest places in the universe, oddly enough, is you just warp to the SOE flotilla at 100, and then burn away from it in a random direction at maximum prop, and within a very short period of time, you become almost uncatchable. Because even if somebody was to probe you down and warp to you at 0, because you're in a dead space pocket, they will simply land on the beacon, giving you in relationship to the beacon, giving you plenty of time to get away. So if you ever need to go AFK or anything like that, or be safe in a drifter wormhole, just know you can warp to the SOE flotilla and burn way off. Obviously, you might want to descan it first, just in case there's like a saber or something there. But otherwise, once you're there and once you've burned off away from the beacon, you are incredibly difficult to catch. Okay. Abyssal observatories report deep flow energy levels dropping for first time in over a year as Trig secured readout. This is just showing some consequences. The drifters and the Triglavians have been fighting significantly in abyssal dead space in a way that has caused strange manifestations, including deep flow rifts, to appear. This is implying that since the Trig have been getting the upper hand in the drifter wormhole, that has caused the drift... Sorry, the screen just went dark for a second. My Eve screen, and I was like, what just happened? Anyway, so this is just kind of pointing out that the victory of the Triglavians in the redoubt has caused the drifters to be less effective in abyssal dead space, lowering the amount of crazy energy that is coming from their conflict in abyssal space. Reports of proving trials to open communication channels with counter-domain fleet confirmed by SOE agents. I honestly don't 100% know what this is in reference to, per se. I'd be welcome to some thoughts. Ashrothi's computer drifter influence detected. Uh-oh, what is happening? In theory, they also have been focusing their efforts against the invasions rather than dead space. They bring the drifters. Yeah. So reports of proving trials. So proving trials are like the usually it's conflict, like it's the proving conduits, right? There is in Terran space, there is a proving ground area, and proving is a big piece of the Triglavian collective's modus operandi. So but reports of proving trials to open communication channels. Reports of proving trials to open communication this sentence doesn't work for me. That's why I'm confused, because this seems to say that the proving trials are to open communication channels with the counter domain fleet. But how would a proving trial open communicate? A proving trial isn't a person; it's a thing. I mean, abyssal dead space, the drifters won't be attacking the Trigs in the abyss if they're already being attacked in their home. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the fact that they call it as part of the redoubt. Not all proving is combat. Proving can also be debate. That's true. But I'm just saying, this sentence doesn't work right? Because this would be the noun, and this is the verb, but how would a proving trial open communication channels with a counter domain fleet? And it's not capitalized. I don't think this is proving grounds coming back, but I'm just saying well, maybe it is. You know what? We should definitely have that on our bingo sheet. Listen, they are a small indie company. Yeah, I don't know 100% what this line means. I feel like the sentence structure is a little confusing. It seems to be that there are proving trials being started, or at least they're opening communication channels with the counter domain fleet about starting proving trials? I don't know, man. Upwell Consortium hires new information security team with the goal of setting industry standards. I'm going to just say that I bet this has something to do with Vanguard, and we'll learn more about it at FanFest. What's going to happen on the 6th? I've said it before. I think that the Drifter attack is going to happen, and we could see even an attack on Jeta. And then this is one of my favorite notes, which is that Suvio Belleron courts controversy by criticizing Glenta election postponement in interviews. Suvio Belleron is so he's a senator. You think the Jeta attack might be on the 1st? I don't think so. Because, like, the whole reason... Okay, so the whole reason why I think that... yes, he is one of the senators from Intaki. That's true. Although he also has been undermined by the Intaki Senate a couple times. But either way, so hold on. Let's go back to this real quick. I don't think that the attack will be on the 1st. Because... So the whole reason why I think that the attack might actually happen is not a lore thing, but a game design thing, right? Like, attacking Jeta would be the single most disruptive thing that CCP has ever done in EVE Online, right? Like, like just as a single action, right? Right now, Jeta is seen as being invincible. During Invasion, it was never invaded. The Triglavians cannot put Raznaborg in it. The closest that anything has ever happened is New Kaldari and Perimeter, which are adjacent to Jeta. Jeta has been, thus so far, completely untouchable by the story. With good reason. I mean, like, players have done Burn Jeta events before. These are highly, highly impactful events. For an entire day, everybody who goes in and out of Jeta gets blown up. This has caused massive market problems, all kinds of ramifications in the past because of most of the time Imperium doing this. But the idea that CCP would do this with NPCs would be like, it would shatter the illusion of safety of Jeta, changing our relationship with Jeta potentially forever. So, it would go from, they'll never do anything to Jeta, to, well, remember that one time that they did something to Jeta? So that's why I think that if you are going to do something extreme as Jeta, you would need to go through every single step to make sure people, like, it needs to be spooky, it needs to be intense, it needs to be impressive, but it also needs to be warned about, at least on some level. And so the fact that they have warned that there's something huge coming on the 6th, but not telling us what it is, I think that that is the best clue that we've ever had that they may actually, in fact, attack Jeta. Because in the end, they'll be like, well, we warned you a whole month ahead of time that something crazy was going to happen, and we gave you a picture of the drifters attacking Jeta. What more do you want? Like, they could not broadcast it more clearly without being like, by the way, guys, we're attacking Jeta on the 6th. So that's the reason why I think it is. Now, is that absolutely going to be the case? I don't know, but I think that's the most fun theory. I'm saying it might be the first because the drifters have happening on attacking summits about drifters when they're happening. Sure. Do we know if FanFest is canonically happening in Jeta this year? Because usually FanFest canonically happens in Yulai. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it could be. It could. So, I think just one day of nullsec Jeta. That would be it. I think that it could. Look at the message they sent out. Hold on. All Arc Discord. Where is it? Tyrannos is inviting you to a conversation. Can I interest you in a mining permit? Oh, except for they don't talk. Post by Tasker Carthane. Okay, hold on. The only post I see from them... You can DM me with a link. That'd be great. I'm not seeing it. FanFest? Is it in the FanFest channel? No. It's not in lore. Is it in events? Based on the latest Deathless message, do you think that maybe Jeffrey Deathless is currently under the influence of the Fulcrum AI? Saw that theory somewhere? Yeah, I actually sensed the... I think it was the original Revenant trailer. I have absolutely believed that the Deathless is at least partially under control of the Fulcrum. You know, because at the very beginning, the voice is very different, and then it eventually, like, becomes more and more like the Deathless. I would show you the video, but I keep getting demonetized every time I show the videos because CCP uses fucking copyrighted music now. All right, important. Let us know if you can attend the Drifter Summit YC127 from CCP Convict. Capsuleer, our records indicate that you'll be soon attending the high-profile convention at Jeta 44. Records also indicate that you'll be partially influential during the recent event, which has become known to Capsuleers as the Race for the Hive. Accordingly, you're invited to attend the Drifter Summit YC127 on Thursday, the 1st of May, on the 16th Nest, where you'll be, or 1600 Nest, where you'll be act as an official delegate for your chosen faction. Please fill out this form to know whether or not you're able to attend. You may receive a similar notification via other means of communication. This is because we appreciate that while some Capsuleers are on their way to the convention, they may not be able to access their Neocom to check their mail. So yeah, they are putting together Drifter Summit the day before FanFest starts. If we go here, we can see FanFest. Yeah, it begins on the 2nd. So the day before FanFest starts, they're going to have an official meeting with some delegates about the Drifter Crisis. Interesting. I still don't think that attack is going to be, like, the attack is going to be on the 1st, because, again, I don't think that meeting is going to be televised. I think that is more like, I mean, that really sounds like, yeah, it's from CCP Convict. So CCP Convict is their, one of their main community managers. And so CCP Convict was, it was signed by CCP Convict by somebody else. I don't actually have the signature block in this picture. I just have the CCP Convict. So if it is by somebody else, let me know. So, on behalf of somebody else. Oh, it's by Sarpati? Interesting. Okay. So the Reverend Mother of the Sisters of Eve. Well, okay. So let's be clear. What I think that is happening here is CCP, the company, is reaching out to some of the main participants in this activity and calling them in the day before everything starts to happen as a way of, like, having a more intimate meeting with them all to kind of give them a peek, perhaps a peek behind the cover or whatever. This happens a lot in ARGs where, you know, the people who are running the ARG reach out to the individuals that are highly influential in the ARG so as to get them better integrated before things get, you know, escalate or whatever, right? So I suspect that, you know, this is not an official communication. It's not in the New Eden News. There's no references about it. These are private emails to these people. And while it is written in universe, I think that that's more CSP Convict just trying to, you know, continue the oh God, what's that wrestling term? Wherever, like, kayfabe. Yeah, it's, you know, CSP Convict's trying to maintain the kayfabe. But really, this is just about, like, hey, we want to have a meeting with the people who have been really active involving this. Yeah. It'd be like the thing that Ash was a part of with the start of the Drifter conflict, IMO. What was I part of? It is an RP message, but it is, like I said, like, I don't necessarily think that the meeting itself will be that RP, because we haven't seen anything broadcasted about it besides this private message that then, in a way, got leaked. The FanFest side implies that FanFest Summit has an outcome that can be influenced by the participant. Well, they have done events at FanFest that has had an influence in the universe. For instance, the Kainoke Plague. Oh, right. Well, so the Emergent Threats video was a matter of, like, we did a lore panel. I and the hydrostatic team called together a bunch of people who knew a lot about the Jove, and we did a lore panel, which was like a 2-hour video. And then CCP contacted Fyridian, the producer of Hydrostatic, and asked him whether or not they could use audio to make the video. So it's a little bit different, but yeah. So let's go ahead and look a little bit into... Oh, shoot. Wait, man, this New Eden News has gone away from us. I don't know if I'm going to be able to edit it and put it out on its own regard, but let's go ahead and say that this is about it for the New Eden News. I don't know, this all kind of flows together, doesn't it? Look back at the Drifter influence on New Eden and the events that have transpired over the last several months. I mean, we kind of already did that the last couple of weeks. Players who made significant contributions to their factions during the race for the Hive have been directly invited to attend this RP Light narrative event. Wait, where is this from? Where are you reading this from? Wait, where are you getting this from, DOE? Oh, yeah, it does say CSP Convict on behalf of Santamona Sarpati and the Sisters of Eve. The FanFest site. Wait, hold on. What? Okay, did I not get there? Is it here, or is it... Where is the FanFest site? Is there a FanFest site? Entire live stream schedule here. Panel discussions, FanFest schedules. What? Why? What? Stand by. I got observatoried. Wait, does the Locust do that now? Hold on. That's right. Doesn't the Locust do that now? Yeah, the Locust does that now. Shit. All right, well, let's just extract. I'm getting there. We'll get back to that in a second. Will there be an advocate on behalf of the drifters attending? Oof. Okay, hold on, guys. Give me, oh my god, a minute and a half? I hate it here. I hate it here. Oh, good. My EVE Online game was making sound, so you could hear me getting decloaked. That's good. But how are you extracting? I used an extraction filament. I know, there's some of you guys I'm sure are in Kino right now trying to kill me. Yeah. This is fine. We're fine. Please don't kill my pacifier. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm out. Kaldari State. Hallelujah. With 2 sleeper forges in it. Okay. Where were we? We've been promoted from news stream to content. Luckily, yeah, we're good. All right, so if we go to FanFest and we go to, you said Thursday, right? Wait, no, that'd be Wednesday, right? Hold on. What day is the 1st? The 1st is Thursday, so it'd be the 30th. Wait. Yeah, wait. On the 1st of May. So that'd be Thursday. So wait, hold on. Monday is today, right? And this is just saying like, hey, by the way, Iceland's cool. And that's fine. And then Tuesday, pre-FanFest mixer. Wednesday, Wonders of the West, Iceland. Oh, yeah, a bunch of Iceland stuff. Land party on top of the world. Tweet Fleet karaoke. Oh, gosh. Thursday. Okay, here we go. And it'd be Thursday at 1600 Nest. So, wait. What? Yes, Drifter Summit, YC127, powered by Worldline. With the Drifter crisis reaching its crescendo, now is a good time to look back at the Drifter influence on New Eden and the events that have transpired over the last several months. Players who made significant contributions to their faction during the race for the Hives have been directly invited to attend this RP Light narrative event as delegates for their chosen faction. Interested spectators are also encouraged to attend and may even have a role to play in the outcome of the summit. This summit is being convened at the behest of the Sisters of Eve and facilitated by the Arataka Research Consortium, represented here by Uriel, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, and Dutch Gunner. Dutch Gunner, wait, Dutch Gunner's here. Why is Dutch Gunner not saying shit? What does Dutch Gunner go? What does Dutch Gunner know, and when did he know it? Wait a minute. Bring me Dutch Gunner. I much would like to speak with him. Uriel, I understand. Like, he got hired by CCP for a while. But Dutch Gunner, you're supposed to be on my side. He was getting on a plane at the start. You troublemaker. Oh, see? You, Malik's like, I think people are reading too much into it. And Dutch Gunner just laughs. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, this is probably not going to be streamed, but who the fuck knows what's going to happen based on that? I don't know. Dutch Gunner better tell us what happens. Look at that. Dutch Gunner's right there. At the top. At the top. Who says I'm not? You're not what? Holding back information? Well, yeah, I think you are. But that's good. That's good. Good job. Well done. Proud of you. Oh, that you're not on my side. Well, yeah, that's fair. But my side is trying to get information from CCP, so good luck. No. All right, so that is interesting. So even before the actual FanFest begins, we're having this Drifter Summit. So I can only assume it does have an outcome. So here's the thing about this, okay? Remember, this is before FanFest begins. So what's interesting about this to me is that the only reason why I would do this, so like think about it this way, okay? FanFest starts on Friday. Everyone has expected FanFest to start on Friday. So most people would have planned, not most people, but you know, a lot of people would have planned to have been available on Friday, not Thursday. Now, admittedly, the people that are actively involved in the Drifter Crisis are also the kind of people that would likely be at FanFest and also would likely be at FanFest early. But wait, no, this is the first day, isn't it? This is the first day. Well, I mean, there's registration. They have some stuff. So yeah, this is the first day, theoretically. No, because it says the main program gets underway on Friday the 2nd. So this is technically before the main program happens. And so if you are wanting to maximize the availability of people to participate, you would think that a lore event like a Drifter Summit that reveals information would be either streamed or would be something you would want to maximize the number of people that you would get to go to it, right? So you'd want the Drifter Summit to be on Friday, right? It says the event starts, yes, there are stuff scheduled on Thursday, but it specifically says here, join us on a live stream where the main program gets underway on Friday the 2nd. So my point is that this is like before all the major announcements, before all the major stuff, this is when you're going to have a lower population of people that are ready to be there because they're mostly there for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But, so having this kind of happen at the last second is interesting to me. But more importantly, I guess there is like a whole set of, there is some presentations and stuff all day on Thursday. So, but all of these presentations are not huge announcements, right? These are things, well, like there's the black hole presentation, which is that's not the big black hole presentation, right? It's not easy growing to a supermassive black hole. Dr. Becky. Tune in FanFest to witness the collision between science. Yeah. So this presentation on black holes is televised. Right? Art of New Eden. That should have been streamed too. What's happening? I'll be unavailable all weekend. Oof. I'll be streaming every day to cover this stuff. This stuff is going to be happening really early in the morning to us, or to, US people. So I'll probably later on in the day, like after FanFest wraps up for the day, I'll do my own stream where I cover the big things of that day. That's true. Everybody is RPing, even if you don't want to. So, at any rate, the point is that the reason why you would do this on Thursday is if the results of this meeting is somehow important to the big announcements the next day, right? Like, if we look on Friday, we had the welcoming ceremony. So the welcoming ceremony hasn't even begun yet, Okay, so we can say pretty firmly that the formal schedule begins on Friday. So this is happening before FanFest really kicks off, and the keynote is the last thing on Friday. So my assumption is that they're going to do this panel off stream just in case, because it's going to be kind of, you know, trying to get a bunch of real people in this RP light scenario and like all that. They may not necessarily want to film that. However, the results of that will be ready in time for the keynote. That's what I think is happening here. Whatever will happen on Thursday will be able to be reported on Friday. And there's that supermassive black hole stream on Friday. So let's see. We also have an EVE lore panel, which is not televised, which is sad. Oh, they do have an EVE Galaxy Conquest panel. Malik, you liar. Maybe we'll check it out again. Who knows? Little Things by CCP Fozzie, Kestrel, Masterplan Mercury, and K1P1. I thought, why is it none of this being streamed? Because they can only stream one. So the stream only covers one stage, and that's going to be this stage. So why are they not streaming the lore panel? Because they're going to be streaming the welcoming ceremony and helping make EVE Universe a reality instead. Yeah, Dr. Becky's pretty... this is a pretty cool thing. The supermassive... It's not easy to... supermassive black holes. Dr. Smethurst? Oh boy, that's a real person. I feel bad mispronouncing her name. A researcher at the University of Oxford has made it her mission to unravel the secrets of black holes and the formation of galaxies. With a PhD in astrophysics and a career dedicated to understanding the universe's most extreme phenomena, she's become one of the most recognizable voices in modern science. Her YouTube channel, Dr. Becky, has over 500,000 subscribers who turn in regularly to watch her break down complex astrophysical concepts with clarity and enthusiasm. She's the author of A Brief History of Black Holes, Why Nearly Everything You Know About Them Is Wrong, and Space 10 Things You Should Know, The Secrets of 14 Billion Years of People Short on Time. Yeah, like, black holes are really, really cool, and it's... I wonder whether or not she's going to talk about, like, black hole decay rate, because Einstein radiation and black hole decay rate is one of the most, like, controversial and, quote-unquote, misunderstood concepts in black hole physics. Even, I think it was even... Or Hawking, not Einstein, Hawking radiation. Even Hawking himself at one point said that like his presentation of how Hawking radiation occurs in the public is theoretically wrong, or not exactly accurate. So there's a lot, like, I'm very interested in this topic. I'll just say that. I don't know how to necessarily tie it into EVE right this second to make you guys interested in it too, but like, yeah, this is the kind of physics stuff that's cool. I'm gonna have to go check it out. I actually haven't watched her YouTube channel. Anywho, so Physics of the Frontier is going to be about EVE Frontier. Then on Saturday, we have... Oh, okay. So on Saturday, we have another art panel. So Thursday, the art of war in New Eden. Oh, wait. Oh! Okay. So this art of war is Rick's Javix. This is, you know, a player presentation the morning on Thursday. So that makes more sense. And then the actual art panel itself is on Saturday, which makes sense. And then we have the Vanguard keynote and the summer expansion keynote. So we have, here's an interesting one. So we have the EVE keynote on Friday, where they're going to do the keynote and then they're going to let everybody go. And so they're going to tease the stuff and, you know, they're going to show us the trailer for the next expansion, announce it, all that sort of stuff. And then on Saturday, they have a, like, second thing, or third thing, I guess, is an entire panel on the details about that keynote. That's what I can, or about that expansion. That's what I would predict. So the past, present, and future of New Eden join CCP Game developers and EVE FanFest for the latest on EVE Online, including exclusive first look at the summer expansion, done, plus exciting updates on EVE Vanguard, EVE Frontier, and EVE Galaxy Conquest. Look at this, Malik. I think that they went back through and they were added EVE Galaxy Conquest in. I'm excited to hear what they have in store. All right, so Saturday. So Saturday we have. They have the keynote, and then they have a panel about it, and then they have a second panel about it, including ship and module balance. So they have a key. So they have the keynote where they announce everything. Then the next day they do a special keynote that's just about the summer expansion. That's 45 minutes long, and then they do another 45-minute long panel that's about the expansion, and then another 45-minute panel that's just about the expansion, specifically focusing on ship and module balance. So we're already seeing that like ship and module balance is going to be a huge part of the summer expansion. Hooray! Right? And I'm assuming that all of this new drifter tech and everything is going to be a big part of why we have all of this ship and module balance. Join us in some of the secret things coming in the EVE Online Summer Expansion, plus any or all balance topics. To ask questions during this panel, please line up, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, the clothing ceremony. So that's it. That's basically the biggest thing that they have to announce or like to talk about. So we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff involving the summer expansion. We're going to have the Art of Eve. There is a lore panel, but it's not going to be put out on their main stream. They do have an EVE Frontier keynote. Why is this? Oh, party. Kill mails? A technical deep dive into the history of kill mails, how they work, and in their future. Logi on kill mails confirmed? Is CSP Aurora presenting any of this? If my understanding is CSP Aurora isn't on the team anymore, right? I don't think so. I also noticed that we didn't see CCP Karker for the little things. So, yeah, she left for Albion, right? Yeah. Thinking it's a two-part expansion we were getting, explaining why there's so many expansion panels? Possibly. Or it could just be that they really want to explain things clearly. And that's it. That's the whole thing. So if we just look at the live streams, this is what we have. So the keynote is at 1700. So that'd be 3 hours ago, our time, 3.5 hours ago, our time. So yeah, I'm going to be able to go live after this at my probably my normal time, and then we'll cover anything of interest each day. So I'll be streaming on Friday and Saturday. Probably. Shit, my son's supposed to be here on Saturday. We'll have to make things work. Maybe he'll come and say hi or something. But yeah, so I'll be streaming on Friday and Saturday, and that is what we can expect. Now then, I guess to wrap things up today, small child on Thursday waiting for Christmas morning like it's Friday. Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I'm going to be streaming this week too to talk about stuff. Yeah. Well, no, I'm probably also going to be streaming on Thursday. But I'm saying I absolutely will be streaming the stuff about the panels after the fact. All right. One last thing to talk about today, evolving the Nest Mastery Packs Expert Systems in a Smarter Plex economy. This has obviously been a huge, huge, huge thing that people have been talking about recently, particularly when it comes to Plex. In fact, so Monday evening will be spent watching two Asherathi streams after. At least two, DK. Probably more than two. Because like I said, I'm going to be streaming this week. Hold on. Eve Marketer. Likely at least three, yeah. Okay, so we can see that Plex is currently actually down to 6.3. It was up to 6.7 for a little bit, which was pretty wild. We can actually see, whew, look at that spike. So, but it's still high over what it was, and 6 is, what? Something's happening, guys. No, this isn't just a normal, like, because that check mark was totally locked in for multiple days. What is happening? Wait, what is happening? I've been streaming for an hour and a half. That means it decayed 12%. Well, I guess it could very well be. So there is a chance. So, like, one of the things about this is that this doesn't get updated until somebody starts to run the Nexus site. So it could very well be that it was lower than we thought and just nobody was running the Nexus site. And then when somebody ran the Nexus site, it updated to 89%. But it dropped 7% in an hour and a half. Weird. Very weird. In fact, everything has gone down from the original picture, right? Because even the Liberated Barbican... Wait, hold on. Wait. Liberated Barbican was above Conflict's Eyrie. And yet now it's 48% and 49%. This feels very weird to me. I don't, but there's nothing about intentionally failing sites being a way to lose influence. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Okay, so the only decay that we know of is... We go to the patch notes. Decrease the rate of influence decay within drifter wormhole systems to 1% from 3%. So, in theory, the only decay that should have happened is like 1 or 2% at most in the last 2 hours. In fact, in order for this decay to have happened, it would have meant that, like, nobody has gone into a Nexus site for the last 7 hours. That's weird. Nope. Only updates when someone runs... Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it could very well be... It could theoretically be that nobody has run the site for 7 hours. But that also means that the so the Asdaja readout was out of checkmark for 7 hours without anyone mentioning it, and now it's been dropped by another... Now somebody has finally gone to run it, and it's down 7% more. It could be. It could be. But wow. Also, but this Liberated Barbican dropping like by almost 20% is very wild. Shoot, I'm also, yeah. Sorry. Okay, so, but we were talking about something else. We were talking about Plex. I don't know, man. I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, it's Monday. You know, things are going to happen. Let me at least post this to Arc. Hold on. I am noticing major decay today in influence. So they're saying that there is also PvP happening that's causing people to fail the sites. So maybe that is doing something. All I know is that this shows that this ain't over yet. This ain't over yet. Okay, so let's talk about this. Dear expert players, in a previous blog, Mastering New Value Packs, we introduced changes to how we present and structure our Eve Store offers. Today, we're continuing that conversation by looking at the latest addition to the new Eden Store, updates to expert systems, and perhaps most importantly, our current thinking around Plex, its place in the economy, and what it is doing to keep it healthy. Since 2022, we've been bringing the Eve Store products to the NES, allowing players to purchase them for Plex and creating a sort of parity between the stores. So what they're saying is that, like, the Eve Store, in this case, just for clarity, Eve Store is the cash shop. Like, when you go on, you know, if you come here and you scroll up, I think it's up, right? And you go store, this is the Eve Store. Right? So what they've been doing is, when they introduce packs here, they've been introducing those same packs on the in-game. So we can see, like, the Nexus Reckoning pack. Do they have an example of it? Can I just do this live? Maybe. Maybe not. Probably not. Maybe not the Nexus Reckoning pack, but whatever. Oh, free skill points. Gotta get that. But they have, when they have released packs on the store, they have started to tend to also put a version of it on the in-game store. So, like, you could buy a Plex pack that comes with stuff, including Plex, or you can buy it with Plex, and it doesn't come with the Plex. It just comes with the other rewards, like the skins and stuff. This has actually been pretty common recently, but that's what they're referring to. The only product we couldn't bring across the currency used was NES Plex, which means that any product that contained Plex had to be reevaluated and restructured to either be cheaper or contain more items to compensate for the value of Plex brings to the pack. That's what I was just talking about, right? Because, like, obviously the ones in the Plex store, you pay for Plex, so it wouldn't make any sense for you to pay for Plex and get Plex from it. So they have to take out the value of the Plex, but then make sure it's still an actual pack. And so they either have to reprice it or put new things into it to make it make sense. This is more evident when it comes to our former starter packs and the new value packs that we're releasing today. While most of the items in the new value packs are the same, they do have different quantities in the two extra products that are NES exclusive: Hypercores and Pilot Body Resculpt certificates. These additions bring unique utility and flair, setting the new packs apart from their Eve Store counterparts. So if we see, we can see that on the Eve Store, this might be related to EU regulations where developers need to be more transparent, direct with the real world values instead of masking things behind a premium currency. I don't necessarily think so, per se. But we can see, like, okay, if we come down here, we can see the level 1 mastery pack Doesn't come with any plex. Let's just go with level 4. 1,000 plex. So the level 4 mastery pack is $100 and comes with 1,000 plex. If we come here, we can see that in the New Eden store, if we come to level 4, it's 2,500 plex. Does not come with plex, but it does come with... Wait. Level 4 mastery. 90 days of Omega. 90 days of Omega. 1,000 plex, no plex. Prodigy bundle. 1,250 million skill points and 2 advanced cerebral accelerators. So we have 1,250,000 skill points and 2 cerebral accelerators, 2 MCT certificates, 2 MCT certificates, 2 skill extractors. Wait. 1 skill extractor. Anything additional? Multiple. Nope, that was part of it. Yeah. So that's it. So it's 2,500 plex, which 2,500 plex is, oh God. So let's call it $100. Wait, that would make it $100. You know, I did see coerces camping the visit sites and the wormholes, killing all the pods that show up. Wonder if the pod kills are causing the decay. I don't think so. Level 5 also has a body resculpt. Yeah, so this one comes with hypercores and comes with body resculpt certificates for 5,000 plex. But that one is in-game. That's the level 5. That's a $200 pack, and it normally comes with 3,000 plex. So they take out the 3,000 plex and they put in the other stuff. So, yeah, either way, what they're trying to say is that they're kind of shifting around the value of things. Oh, here's a chart. So, the contents of the NES versions of the Mastery packs are as follows. So you can see here. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, hypercores and the resculpt certificates are only in the top level 1. Now, why do they go with this? Well, because hypercores and resculpt certificates are 2 things that they do cost plex. They can only be gotten with plex in the or in the shop, I think. But like in the New Eden store, you can buy hypercores, you can buy resculpt certificates. On the store, wait. Maybe not. Skill management? Extractors? Wait. Packs? Huh. Okay, so maybe you couldn't buy those on for cash. I thought you could. I thought you could buy hypercores for cash. Either way. So hypercores are used in the hypernet in order to put up things on the hypernet for value, or, you know, for gambling. And resculpt certificates are obviously to allow people to change their physical, like, bones and stuff. You can, of course, change your clothing whenever you want, but if you want to change your appearance, like your physical body structure, you need a resculpt certificate. These are 2 things that often, they do cost plex. They are a value, but they're not often part of packages, right? We see a lot of MCTs, we see a lot of skill extractors, but not a lot of the data, or the hypercores or the resculpt certificates. So this is an opportunity to kind of feed those into the system a little bit more, I would say. Although it's weird that they make a big deal about the fact that they're adding these in, but it's only in the highest level Plex pack. Like, they didn't do that for the previous ones. They just kind of lowered some of the value. We believe that these updated packs will offer more flexibility for Plex using capsuleers and expand access to progression tools for a wide range of players. And if you're already picked up similar packs from the Net Eve store, don't worry, these are different, so you'll be free to grab both. Double mastery! Don't worry, guys, you can keep buying them. Okay, expert systems become items. This is a big one. So expert systems remain Nest exclusive products except for themed versions sold in identity packs on the Eve store. They offer capsuleers temporary access to key skills and ship roles, plus a skill plan to guide permanent training, making them ideal for trying out new paths without training commitment. Below is a short list of expert systems that we have tried so far. The core ship operations, which has the Magic 14, Brand Manager, which is Paragon Hub stuff, Enforcer, which is Tech 1 frigates and Tech 1 weapons, Faction Warfare, Tech 1 destroyers and Tech 1 and Tech 2 weapons, Logistics Pilot, Tech 1 Logi cruisers with Tech 1 repairers, Mining Barge operations, Tech 1 barges, Hauler operations, Tech 1 haulers, Gas harvesting, Tech 1 gas harvesters, and Space exploration, Tech 1 exploration frigates. Of all of these, I would say the most valuable one is the Mining Barge because, you know, an alpha player can get core skills. Anybody who's interested in Paragon hubs can just grab that. They can get frigates and Tech 1 skills. They can get destroyers and Tech 2 weapon skills. They can get Tech 1 logic cruisers and Tech 1 repairs. These are all things that you can get just as a normal alpha pilot doing their thing. Even gas harvesting. The one exception is mining barge operations. So in order to become a big-time miner, as you know, you just joined the game, you want to get deeper into mining. This is actually a very common thing. And then you get told that the venture is the only thing you can do without going Omega. Omega costs 500 plex a month. However, mining barge operations expert systems cost 15 plex for a week. So if you can get the ability to use mining barge for an entire month for 60 plex total, as opposed to 500 plex and then need to train them. So for those who don't necessarily need to go Omega, but just want to be able to mine in a mining barge, this ends up being a really, really good deal. In fact, we have a couple of people in our mining fleets that are utilizing this right now, actually, or have been this week. So, you know, this has been a cool one. But you've always had to buy this with Plex, right? You could go out and buy the Plex for ISK, but you would have to do that and then buy the mining barge expert system. We see expert systems as something that can be further developed, and we invite you to brainstorm with us the kind of opportunities you see expert systems being used for, or to share with us your favorites on our official Discord. Expert systems have helped players explore EVE career paths faster and smarter, and we believe that there's much more room to expand. After consultation with the CSM and several of New Eden's fleet commanders, we've lifted the trade restrictions on evergreen expert systems, unlocking their full potential, and not just as personal soulbound tools, but as strategic assets in the form of regular EVE items that can be stocked, moved around, and traded. One of the weird things about expert systems was that they could not, they weren't an in-game item. You would buy them, you would just open, even if you opened up the thing that showed expert systems, it would just open up the cash shop for you to be able to get those expert systems. They never existed in game. So now what they're going to do is they've made the expert systems into physical items. Oops, hold on. I mean, like digital items, obviously, but you know, in-game actual items that can be traded and such. Hold on. Wait, what just happened? Here we go. Yeah. So we can see that they added the expert systems as actual in-game items. So now we can go log out. Oops, gotta claim my stuff. So a corp could supply their alphas with expert systems. That's correct. We can now actually keep a stash of those expert systems, so we can just provide them for people if they need them at the time, which is pretty awesome. Although, arguably, we could have just handed them 15 plex and done the same thing. But what it does mean is if we go to the market, we should be able to find... Is it under pilot services? Expert systems. So here we go. The mining barge operation is 89 million ISK. Wait. Hold on. So we open up our calculator. go 15 times 6.2. That wasn't right. 15 times 6.2, 93. So if you were to buy the mining barge expert system with just Plex, with the current Plex price of, I guess, 6.2, which is actually low. It's currently, well, it's about 6.2 to 6.3, and it has been higher than 6.2 for a lot of the time. Now, you could have theoretically bought it on a buy order a couple of times, but if you can see, a lot of the time it's been above 6.2, so that's a fair guess. And as long as you're getting it for 6.2, it's actually theoretically slightly cheaper to buy the mining barge expert system for ISK on the market than it costs to buy it with Plex. And this is actually true about a lot of Plex items. Often the item itself is worth less in ISK than buying it off the Plex store. So it could be worth, especially us watching this, and putting this on a putting up buy orders for these and collecting a few of them so we can provide them for our own dudes. Yeah, that could happen. Especially with these buy... If anybody actually sells to a buy order, which some people have, you could get a mining barge expert system for 11 million ISK. If you did that, that'd be pretty... You'd be feeling pretty good about yourself. Anywho. The state of Plex. Okay, let's talk Plex. The primary currency of the nest, the backbone of player-driven trading, and for many, a long-term investment vehicle. It's no secret that Plex plays multiple roles in EVE, and right now those roles are colliding in ways that we believe deserve both attention and action. Over the past few years, we've steadily added more products to the Nest and the Paragon Hub. That means more ways to use Plex, which is good, but it also puts more pressure on the supply side of the equation. Like we are seeing now with it being one of the lowest in the market. Like we are seeing now with it being one of the lowest the market has ever seen. At the same time, Plex has developed a kind of stock market appeal, especially among veteran players who see it as an asset to hoard or flip. The result, a large, ever-growing, slow-moving float of Plex held in wallets across New Eden, leading to less liquidity on the market. So this is actually a big thing because I remember even back when I was first starting playing the game, Plex was like the de facto investment tool, right? Where the idea is that I don't know where EVE is going, but I do know that the price of Plex only goes up. Now, that didn't remain 100% true. I think it was 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. We actually saw Plex level off or even drop a little bit, which was a weird time. And actually, even now, like, it's a lot less that way than it was before. But, like, this idea that Plex is a method to invest your wealth, right, became a very popular thing. You know, you would transfer, as you gained ISK, you would buy more Plex, and you would have your kind of hoarded collection of Plex, and it grows. And that is always, as long as I've been playing this game, been a thing. And also, Plex is one of the most traded commodities in the game, which I don't know what they mean by the lowest the market has ever seen. What does that mean? Are they saying the volume being traded? I mean, the volume being traded seems pretty steady to me. I don't know what they mean by that. Sorry. There we go. So either way, the supply is low. Like the amount of Plex on the market. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to look up. I don't know if I can validate that information. Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah, okay. I do see... Whew, look at that spike. on the 17th. Can't remember what happened on the 17th. What happened on the 17th? People are saying that the Mimitar one dropped so hard because nobody was actually touching it and it was at 66% for ages. Look how many sell orders versus... Oh, yeah, the extractor sale. Got it. Well, my point is that, like, this looks steady. I can't check volume on market in here. And also, I can't compare it to any previous year. So this is, like, I'm at the limits of what I can double check. Okay, so basically what this is saying is an increasing amount of Plex is being just simply hoarded in people's wallets as opposed to being flipped or spent. And a big piece of this, so if you think about this, there's another piece to this that I don't think that they're talking about here. You know, this limited availability, especially during rare sales or high activity events, creates volatility and drives up the ISK price of Plex. That volatility can destabilize the broader player economy, contributing to inflation and making the climb steeper for new and returning players who rely on Plex to access Omega for other Nest items. We know this is not sustainable. Actually, so let's look for a second here at the latest monthly economic report. We've seen this a few times before, and we've talked about it, but we haven't really talked about the implication of it, which is that, you know, we can see that player wealth, character wealth in particular, continues to go up pretty steadily. And we can see that especially after 2023, which is, if I remember correctly, the end of scarcity, there's this noticeable uptick in the gain of player wealth. Why is that important? Because if you think about it, what we're really happening here is a question of economics, right? We have two different currencies. We have Plex. We have three different currencies. We have cash, US dollar. We have ISK, and we have Plex, which is the currency that is the intermediary between the two, right? So the price of Plex in cash hasn't changed since 2022, I think it was, when they raised the prices of everything, 2023, which is ironically about the same time. So the price of Plex in cash changed, but it's been steady ever since then, right? So that side of the equation is locked. So the value of ISK to cash, the cash remains steady, because the price that it takes to transfer cash into ISK is locked in, right? Now, granted, sales kind of change that, but, you know, for the most part, that's locked in. So as money enters the equation, as there is more ISK in the universe, then by the nature of economics, the value of ISK versus the dollar gets weaker, right? There's more ISK, same amount of money influence. So the value of ISK versus the dollar gets weaker. And this is represented by requiring more ISK for the same amount of Plex, i.e. Plex prices go up. So, all things being equal, we would expect that the price of Plex to slowly creep up as the price of ISK is devaluated versus the price of the value of dollars as seen through the medium of Plex. All right. So that's a piece to this too. And as they have introduced more faucets, this becomes a bigger problem. Now, obviously, with people buying Plex with dollars and then not spending them, like the fact that Plex is being pulled out of the system and the fact that Plex is being stored and hoarded is only making this system worse, because basically it's like slashing the supply of Plex, but of course the ISK is still the same. So as people have better ways of getting ISK, the value of that Plex versus ISK goes up. It takes more ISK to buy the same amount of Plex. Inflation is vastly more in control than other games, even considering Eve is 20 plus years old. That's actually 100. Like, that's a great point, Havoc, which is that, like, we're talking about something. I'm not implying that there's something that CCP has done wrong or that there's something bad or anything. We are just describing the mechanics by which these things are happening. No judgment. Now, this is a 20-year-old long game. This idea of accumulated wealth is a big deal. In fact, this is the entire reason why scarcity happened, was because of a fear of runaway player wealth and its implications and whatnot. So here we go. A lot of other games just have to tack on new currencies or do other things to make it so that because they can't deal with these kinds of things. The fact that Eve actually deals with this stuff so well is one of the unique things that's about Eve, which is why this issue is so important, right? So, okay, great. Here's what we've done so far. Now, remember, it used to be that when CCP put out Plex, like, the other complicated thing here is that Plex is CCP's money, right? So on the one hand, what that means is that CCP as a company is encouraged to have us buy Plex. This is one of those things that a lot of people often get wrong when it comes to Plex, which is the idea that people that pay for their account with Plex are not giving CCP any money. And that isn't quite true. Because the thing is that, excuse me, the guy who paid CCP for the Plex only, in this case, did so that they could sell it, right? And so they could have bought a month of game time for $20. Obviously, sales will change these numbers. But instead, they bought 500 Plex for $25, right? So they actually spent more money than it would take to sub. Now, obviously, sales change this, but it's almost always true that subbing with Plex is more expensive than subbing with just buying an Omega account with cash, right? So what that means is that guy who's buying the 500 Plex is the justification, which is the reason why that other dude paid CCP $25 instead of $20. So in essence, the guy who's plexing their account is actually providing indirectly more revenue for CCP than somebody who's just paying Omega for their account. Now, granted, there's an extra step that does require an extra person, but that doesn't really matter in this case. What you're talking about is somebody paid $25 for a month of Omega versus $20 for a month of Omega, okay? So the other thing here is, what that means is that Plex functions as a liability to the CCP company, right? And we saw this a lot more, especially before they got bought out by Pearl Abyss. I don't actually know how the internal politics of this has changed per se, but if you think about it, Plex exists as, like, let's put it this way. Okay, so like you run a restaurant, right? And you give away $1,000 worth of gift certificates. That $1,000 worth of gift certificates remains on your books as a liability because in the future, people could claim that and then get something for you for no value to you, right? They've already paid the money, or they've already, they have the value. And so now you just have to pay it to them. You have to honor the gift card without getting any new money in. So that's a liability. There's $1,000 on their books that says, hey, we might have to get rid of $1,000 for the product and receive no revenue for it, right? So in the same way, Plex exists as a form of liability to CCP. In theory, people could, like, if there's enough Plex on the market, people could just not pay cash and only pay Plex. And while I just said that means that they paid $25 instead of $20, that means that they spent $25 6 months ago, that doesn't do CCP any good right now, right? So if suddenly everyone started spending Plex to Plex their account instead of ISK and nobody was buying new Plex, then CCP would have zero revenue, but the same number of active accounts. That's a big problem. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen, but on some smaller scale, it's happening all the time. So Plex on their books is a liability, which is also why, like Oz has pointed out, that sometimes it seems that they're doing these Plex sales or they're doing discounts on Plex as a way of kind of clearing off the Plex, because that makes their books look better, right? If they can clear off a whole bunch of liability, that realizes the revenue. You know, somebody paid $1,000 for Plex in January. CCP got that $1,000 in, but they can't really treat it as fully theirs because that $1,000 represents $1,000 of lost revenue later, assuming that people use it to pay for their account. So that's what they mean by laying on a liability. So if they can convince you to spend that 1,000 Plex now, then they can strike it off their books, and that $1,000 that you gave them is good to go. So, and then on top of that, the more ways they can convince you to spend it that doesn't have a real life dollar value, the better. So if you spend Plex on skins, right, CCP wasn't expecting any money for that skin. You know, there wasn't an alternative way to buy it. So you having a new skin doesn't cost them anything, but it does wipe the Plex off the books, which is a huge deal for them. Okay? Yes, Marquee Dragon spending 70,000 Plex on extractors means that it doesn't become future game time. It just becomes in-game items, which CCP likes this. Okay? So CCP has been trying to pump us with all these different ways to spend Plex. But here's the thing. Like I said, before Pearl Abyss, especially, and I don't know whether or not this is necessarily related to Pearl Abyss. So when I buy Omega 24 months at a time, that's a liability also? No, not quite, because that's already committed. You don't hold that in reserve, right? You bought Omega for 24 months, you get Omega for 24 months. Now, obviously, you're not going to pay for Omega again for 24 months, so CCP is not going to get any new revenue from you, but that revenue's already realized by that 24 months. Now, if you bought 24 months worth of Plex, but then did not spend that on Omega, now there's this giant pile of potential Omega that isn't being realized, that could be realized at any time, and CCP can't do anything about it. That's the difference between buying 24 months worth of Omega and buying 24 months worth of Plex. Okay? So, the thing, though, is, historically, CCP has actually made a point that anytime... yeah, there's no risk in Omega. A risk, like, if you buy 24 months of Omega, congratulations. It's pretty much the same as just buying it every month for the next 24 months. It's just CCP is able to guarantee that it's going to happen because you've already done it, right? So that's actually good for them. Anywho, so it used to be that anytime CCP had Plex that they were putting out there through any other means, they made a big point of it was always confiscated Plex, right? So when there's a sale on Plex, the sale for Plex on the NES, and then collect the revenue and dear it at the same. Yeah, if they can get you to convert that Plex directly into purchases from the NES, then they can clear it away right away, which is great for them. So every time, so they used to do, or they sometimes do, like, GM caravans. And they put Plex in the GM Caravan's Rex. So that way when you blow them up, oh my God, you get Plex. That's so cool, right? So, but that Plex has to come from somewhere. And financially, that's new Plex into the system. And so on their books, they don't like that, right? The number crunchers, the bean counters in the world won't like that you suddenly put a certain amount of liability on their books without them actually receiving any revenue, right? If you make new Plex out of somewhere. So what they do is, when they ban accounts, they take that Plex, or, they take the value out of those accounts. And if there's Plex in those accounts, that's the Plex that they would use to do Plex giveaways or anything else like that, historically. Now, they have stopped talking about that. So I don't know if that's literally true or not anymore. And the biggest example, this is something I've been talking about. Yeah, the real economists at CCP don't like it. This is something I've been talking about for a little while when it came to the daily rewards, right? So now they put up not that one. Where's opportunities? So if we go to opportunities, we can see that on the third milestone, you get 5 plex. And we've kind of made fun of the fact that this is 5 plex. But if you think about this, this is an ongoing, continuous, fully within the power of the player, ability to generate new plex without paying cash. So I've long since theorized that either they have such a big stockpile of confiscated plex that it's no longer like a problem for them, or there's something else going on. And I think that this shows that there's something else going on, which is that they've increased the ways that people spend plex that don't represent a financial interest to CCP, right? People are now spending it on expert systems. People are spending them on skins. People are spending them on Skinner. You know, all these sorts of things, right? So now they're actually removing plex from the system without people using it to fund accounts enough that they've actually overshot their problem. And so now the flow of plex is significantly more important than ensuring that you get like every single dollar worth of every single plex, right? So, so what we see is they've introduced new ways of inserting plex into the system. Plex is now becoming a big enough of a thing that they can just put out new plex without people buying them into the system, as long as it's a thin enough of a trickle just to keep the system rolling. Because while plex being expensive is good for CCP's books, like plex being expensive in ISK is good for CCP's books, plex being expensive in ISK is bad for CCP's appearance and for the players' like sense of well-being, right? Players that can't plex their account don't play anymore, and that can be a bigger problem, right? So it behooves CCP to keep things rolling. So they've started adding plex to Air Daily Goals. They've added it to seasonal events. They've even occasional plex gifts mark special milestones and in-game events. Yeah, the non-tangibles. Mysterious Galnet crates 1 and 2 featured in Twitch drops have a small chance of plex. And that's a good one because they can actually influence, they could probably influence the rate in which plex is generated through this method, right? So they've actually started to trickle in plex in different ways to compensate for the fact that like the demand for plex has vastly outstripped the supply of plex. These steps help, but we know they're not enough. We're exploring additional tools and mechanics that can rebalance the flow of plex, making it feel less like a speculative asset, more like a practical fluid currency that powers your in-game choices. We'll be sharing more soon, but in the meantime, we would like to hear from you. What do you think is the plex future of plex should be? Join our conversation. So what comes next? Whatever changes we make, they'll aim to open doors for new pilots, close loopholes for armed tiers, and shake loose some of the unhealthy speculation that built up around plex over time. Because in EVE, it's not the richest who survive, it's the smartest. Knowledgeable and experienced still wins fights, wins wars, and builds empires. That's the balance for protecting. So, like, I agree, honestly, Dejat, that, like, I like plex the way it is, but I also see that, like, it's weird, because this idea that plex costs too much, because, look, the value of plex has gone up. Like, this has been an argument since plex was under 3 million a unit, right? Like, this is an argument since before it was split into 500 plex for one. So this idea that, like, if the plex prices are too damn high is a very relative idea. And it also reflects our increasing ability to earn ISK, right? Because as people, like, that's the thing that people, like, don't really... If you could earn enough ISK to plex your account in like a day, then a lot more people would do that, which would mean that more people are plexing, which would mean that there's more demand on plex, which would mean that the price would go up, right? Like, that's the problem with this idea of like players can argue, we can argue that plex is out of control or whatever, but just realize that when you think about like the effort it takes to plex an account, this is a relative thing between all players who are looking to buy the plex. I'm not that old in the game. I was 5 million when I started the game. Now it's 6 million. 20% inflation is a big deal. Well, how long have you been in the game? I'm not saying that it isn't necessarily an issue, but like I said, plex inflation is more of a reflection of our increasing ability to earn ISK than anything else. Now, obviously, one of the things that they're pointing out here is that it's also an indication of how many new ways, new demands on plex that exist. But really, fundamentally, plex is a relationship between the US dollar or the currency that's being used to buy the plex and ISK. So as ISK inflation as ISK becomes easier to create, January 2021. So 20% inflation in 4 years. I mean, that sounds about right. Obviously, like, you can say that that's too much, and that's a very valid position to have. 20% inflation is very big. Another thing to point out, though, is that, like, this doesn't represent a 20% inflation across the market, right? We can look at Plex, and we can see, like, this is obviously a pretty significant trend upwards in the last year, right? It went from 5 million to 6 million in the last year. Okay, so you can talk about 20%, 20%. This is 18%, I think, inflation in 1 year. Okay, so, right, that's a big problem. But if we look at the Caracal, this is the weird thing about this. If we look at the Caracal, we don't see that inflation, right? If we look at, I'm not going to go with Battleship because that would be a bad idea. But I don't know. Drake. Fine. We look at the Drake. Okay, well, fair enough. Why did the Drake go up in price? I can't remember now. Did they rebalance something about it? I can't remember. So this went from 50 million to 70 million. So that did go up in price. My point is that, oh God. Oh, okay. My point is that some of these things are influenced by other stuff. But in general, the Plex inflation is different than, like, ship inflation, right? Ship inflation is controlled by player activity, mineral prices, etc., whereas Plex is the relationship between ISK supply and Plex supply, or dollar supply, people buying Plex. So, yes, I do remember when I first joined the game, it was about 300 million ISK a month to Plex your account. So the point is that this is not inflation in the same way that you would normally think of inflation, because it's not across the board. Plex is usually independent of... Sight-Dream Burn has been around since before March. Right? I know. Didn't they introduce new ones in March? Oh. Oh, every year in March. That makes sense. You say many funny words, Spaceman, but Grugs still shoot rock. So, yeah, this is a complicated issue. We're going to have to keep an eye on what CCP has to do with it. I have concerns because, like, my concern is that this solution of, like, having new ways, like, small trickles in of Plex, isn't necessarily what's helping the hoarding thing. if anything, I think that part of the problem is that we've seen. Look, this is, in my opinion, this is a human behavior problem. Hey, thank you for that. And Achieved gets the gifted membership. Perfect. Okay, so it's just like we see in our current real life economy. Now, I'm going to do my best to not wade into the politics of anything, but the point is that when things are more volatile, when things are more chaotic, when things are less trusted, when the economy is less trusted, people tend to hoard, right? As the market becomes more disruptive, people respond by tightening up, right? And for better or worse, CCP has engaged in a significantly more aggressive attempt to rebalance, fix, tweak, destabilize, end stagnation within EVE Online. And all of those things have done that. They've sparked wars, even though the nullsec doesn't want to admit to it. They've influenced the economy. They've changed the way that we interact with the market. They've changed the way that we've done things in industry. Some things have gone from being incredibly worthless to extremely valuable. Some things have gone from valuable to being almost unused. Deshat Lamont, thank you for that. So as the universe has become more and more untrustworthy. So just so you guys know, we don't hear about this anymore. But back in 2017, I remember like when Citadels and all those sorts of things were starting to like become a bigger and bigger thing, and we're getting into the Reign of the Roke Wall and all that sort of stuff. Lifeblood expansion. The Goon Swarm bragged about having a 5-year plan, right? Like they had figured out like how they wanted to transition themselves, and they had their plan for like how they were going to build up. You don't hear about 5-year plans anymore from alliances, because the idea that things are going to be the same in 6 months, let alone 5 years, has been completely thrown out the window. But there's one thing that remains constant, right? Titans prices collapsed in 2000. Carriers prices went down and up and down. Dreadnoughts have had their prices slashed twice at least since their spike up. Battleships keep going back and forth about whether or not they're able to be built versus hard to build versus whatever, right? All these things have gone all over the place. One thing has remained true. Plex prices go up. Why would you invest your money in Titans? Why would you invest your money in carriers? Why would you invest your money in any of the big things that people invested money in before besides Plex? The one thing that has remained a constant is Plex. Now, sure, if you had if in 2019 you had decided to put all of your money into Isogen before going AFK, then you come back fabulously wealthy, and this happened to at least one person. But how are you going to guess that Isogen, of all of the things, were the thing that's going to explode in price in 2019? You can't. But what you can do is predict in 2019 that Plex will be more expensive in 2021. So you would invest in Plex, lock it up, hold it away until you absolutely need to transfer it back into ISK. And so as the game becomes more interesting, as things become more volatile, that drives people to hoard Plex. So my thing here is this doesn't, in my opinion, fix the problem per se. This is going to be a hard one, guys. How do we provide enough Plex? New Plex sources doesn't necessarily feel like the way that people will stop people from hoarding it. Those people will just suck up the new Plex, right? If it's a reasonable price. So there has to be a way that we change the relationship between people and Plex. And this has caused some pretty catastrophic theories to rise up. So I don't know what the solution is, but I do know that CCP and all of us need to tread extremely carefully, because trying to fix this problem could be absolutely devastating. one of the theories was like, well, what if you had a limit on how much Plex you could store long term? That would be like arbitrary things like that would be awful, probably. So that's my point, is that like this is I guess my problem is that I can admit that this is at least on some levels a problem. I think on some levels you can look at this and be like, well, this is just economy at work, right? But I'm afraid that any solution is going to be, you know, any cure is going to be worse than the disease. Clearly, the answer is a Plex HyperNet. Oh God. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the matter. Please let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. Is Plex prices a problem? Is it a problem enough that it needs to be fixed? How could it possibly be fixed in a way that doesn't make it worse? Yeah, an expiration date on Plex, that'd be yeah, that's my point. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that they should do that or even that they are thinking about doing that, but they're talking about making changes. And it's like, I just don't understand what kind of changes that they could make that would allow this to be solved. And the reason why I say that is because, like, one of the biggest problems is that historically so far, their way of solving this is by having Plex sales and Plex discounts, right? So they sell people Plex for cheaper, which injects Plex into the system, and then they discount the things that are bought with Plex, which encourages people to spend Plex. So the problem with that is that this seems to fix the problem. We want to encourage trade and spending of Plex and lower the value of Plex. But like, we just had a Plex sale and Plex went up in price. So the problem with this is that these idea of doing it through sales increases the volatility of the situation, not decreases it, right? If the price of Plex per dollar fluctuates over time, then people are going to be less inclined to buy Plex for full value, which means that people are going to wait for opportunities to buy Plex, which could actually reduce the supply of Plex in the game. Likewise, if people know that there will be discounted prices on the Nest store with Plex, then they're going to wait and spend less, making less flow out of it, and making it so that people hoard during times that they're not a sale. And those people who are hoarding are not, like, their life isn't the game. This isn't a real life stock market. This is a game. And so, yes, it is down a bit again now, but like, yeah. But the point is that, like, a Plex sale could happen and a lot of people aren't going to pay attention to it, right? So I'm concerned. This is a good example, in my opinion, of how their attempts to try to fix the problem actually ends up increasing the volatility of the situation, right? And that makes people want to hoard more, not less. So that's a hard one. I think that one of the solutions could theoretically be that there could be Plex opportunities tied to effort or individuals, so that way it's less. I don't even know, man. I don't know. I think we all need to be more responsive to our very robust market if we want to keep the system. I don't know if this is something that we can, like, necessarily decide that we want to support it versus not support it. This isn't like support your local business or whatever. Because this is, like, happening on a large scale. This isn't a psychology issue. This is a sociology issue. Can't hand out Plex in a game where everybody has 50 accounts. I mean, they literally just did. One more time, if you go watch my stream from last week, you too can get 100 Plex or up to 300 Plex per account, or risk-free. Sure, it takes like 9 hours or whatever, but it's still going to be faster than almost any other way of doing the event. What's the trick for that? You can go watch it, but it's you use tourism filaments. You visit the different wormholes in order. Yeah, there'd have to be a cultural change, but the point is that you're not going to have a cultural change when this is just objectively the correct answer, right? The biggest thing that they could do is give things for people that big things for people to need to spend the ISK on that isn't Plex. So, ironically, one of the best things that they could do, possibly for the price of Plex, would be to buff Titans. If suddenly a bunch of people need to buy Titans, then they will dump Plex on the market as a method of... So one of the reasons why we saw an increase in the price of Plex during a Plex sale was because we also saw really good deals that required people to have Plex. So even though there were people that were buying Plex and selling it on the market, there were also people that were just buying them up off the market. So that way, in fact, they were selling things so that way they would have enough ISK so that way they could buy Plex so they could spend it on the discounted stuff. This is actually bad, right? You would think, oh, well, this is helping Plex flow, but it actually increases the price of Plex during that time. Now, granted, it does take the Plex out of the system, which is why we see a dip down after that event is over. And it did take that Plex out of the system, so that's theoretically good. However, if they started to encourage us to spend ISK on things more, like Titans or other stuff, then people would need to sell their stockpiles of Plex for ISK to get those things. I think that that's the answer. We actually need to, right now, this isn't a question of Plex. Plex isn't the problem. The problem is we are in a hoarding economy, right? We went from an abundance economy to a stagnation or a scarcity economy, and now we are in a hoarding economy. So, yeah, rebalancing ships. New things for us to spend money on. That's, in my opinion, if there is a way out of this whole situation, that's going to be it. Correct. Yeah. Well, actually, I don't even know if it's necessarily has to be an everyman versus the guys. It just needs to be the guys at the top. It just needs to be something like Titans are for the guys at the top, but they represent massive chunks of ISK, right? Well, that's the thing. Like right now, ironically, right now is a really good time to do this, right? Because people aren't necessarily... So people have Plex in stockpiles, right? So if they do a Plex sale, that does inject a whole bunch of new Plex into the system, but a chunk of that Plex is just going to get sucked into those stockpiles, weakening the value of those injections of Plex and just making the problem worse. However, as the IRL economy gets worse and people don't want to buy Plex, if people then need ISK, you don't have people buying Plex to turn it over to ISK. I mean, you don't have as many people. You have people opening up their coffers to turn the Plex that they've hoarded into ISK. That is the path forward, I would say. Also, the amount of players that can blitz out high-income activities and scale their income with skill injectors mean that they can simply keep buying Plex to inject a new account that that will pay for itself. That's been less true since scarcity, but that is a piece to it. Yeah. But that's what I think. I don't know anything. What do you guys think? Does that make sense to you guys? What could be the secret answer? Is the answer so every Corvette? No. Every Corvette comes with one Plex and Titans get boot. And now we have T2 Titans. No, I don't know. They need to increase the number of Titans dying committed to the field. Right. And that's, I mean, like, that's a rebalance issue, right? You just need to make it so that committing them makes sense. But more importantly, like, a really good example of this would be like the beginning of the Reign of the Rogue Wall. This isn't, so the problem is that it can't just be Titans being buffed, because there's already a lot of Titans in existence. One of the things that was really interesting about the Reign of the Rogue Wall was that Rogue Walls went from being not very popular and only popular amongst like foreman leaders of mining operations to being something that people actually, everybody wanted to mine in. So what ended up happening is the people that had Rogue Walls lost the value of those Rogue Walls. They could no longer do what they wanted to do with them. They didn't do off-grid boosting anymore. So all the people that used Rogue Walls originally were kind of out of luck, but that was a very small population compared to the people that need Rogue Walls now, or like then, right, or after the change. So suddenly we see this massive changeover of wealth as people inject into Rogue Walls, build Rogue Walls. Suddenly there's a bunch of people that need to be able to use Rogue Walls and need to have Rogue Walls that don't have Rogue Walls and don't have the ability to get Rogue Wall or to use Rogue Walls. So they have to fix that as fast as possible, and they spend money to do that. So it isn't just a matter of like buffing Titans, because then people would just use the Titans that they also have stockpiled. But if they came out with Tech 2 Titans, suddenly you have a new thing that people need to be able to do. I'm not necessarily saying like there are other better ways of doing that. This is a very crude kind of idea, but like you get what I'm saying, right? A new thing, maybe drifter ships, right? If suddenly drifter ships are a thing in the game with new skills and new stuff, that's new things that people must spend their efforts on. So that would be closer to a kind of direction. You need to encourage people to want to spend ISK, not encourage people to want to spend Plex. By encouraging people to want to spend Plex, especially in an intermittent way, they're actually encouraging people to also hoard Plex. Yeah, some kind of mechanism that requires the Titan on field but gives the fleet big bonuses. I've long since said like the phenomena generator of the Titan is like one of the big. I've said before that like I really want to see the Titans rebalanced. I want Titans to have their bridging capabilities taken away. If they want to bridge, then they got to go with them, either like as a conduit jump or in the same way that like a the Zordash, the Triglavian, it's not a mothership. Uh-oh. My brain. Help. World Arc. Like the World Arc, you know, you jump in and then open up the conduit while you're there. Or just a conduit jump that brings them with it. Either way, it requires the Titan to commit to the field. I've also said that I want the Titan to be like the height of all sorts of control. So like you can have it has fighters, it has strong logistics support, it has like basically the damage of a dreadnought and the logistics of a fax and fighters, and a phenomena generator that has a massive effect on how the ships fight. So that way it's a completely, like you can do different fleet compositions that rely on the Titan boosts. So what this does is it makes it so committing a single Titan to the field is a huge change, but multiple Titans to the field becomes increasingly redundant. And just like, well, you might as well just bring a Dread or a Fax instead of a Titan, because it's not going to be like you're spending 10 times more for effectively the same amount of output, right? But that first Titan changes the game. I think that there would need to be some sort of change like that in order for Titans, like Titans need to be able to impact the battlefield in a way that doesn't necessarily scale. But that's just my thoughts. Obviously, a lot of people, especially Titan pilots, don't agree with me. So, also kill asset safety for Titans. Anywho, that's a lot of thought, but let's see. Tomorrow, We will be looking at what's going on with the event. We're going to continue to follow the site. 89%. Is that what it was before? It was. Okay. But also, if people can hop into the Discord, one thing that, oh no, that's your million free skill points. But if you hop into the Discord, then you can DM me. I would like to get this week. We're going to be building so tomorrow I think probably we'll be building the bingo cards for the FanFest keynote. And I'll be talking about the 5 things I cannot forgive CCP for. Because I feel like I'm going to be white knighting a lot in the next week. So I want to, make it clear that I'm not happy with everything that they've done. Turn Titans into mobile player stations. Give them a long-ass cooldown, changing from a station to mobile mode. Man, that's been suggested so many times. It's a cool idea. It would be interesting if, you didn't build Athenors anymore, or you didn't build structures anymore. You turned Titans into them. That'd be cool. Oh, yeah, it did go up. So it's gone up. So the Liberated Barbican's gone up 7% in the last hour. And the Conflux Irie has gone up 11% in the last hour. Is that fucking true? Hold on. 11% in the last hour would mean 3 dread sites completed. That might be fine. So it's very likely, my guess is what's happening with these numbers is it's just the fact that this is early in the morning. I don't think reworking Titans would be the main way of going about that, but rather add a new mothership class akin to the original fantasy supercarriers were supposed to be. I agree, Wizard. Yeah, Tech 2 or whatever supercarriers would make a lot more sense than that, but yeah. We're just using Titans as kind of like a stand-in. It's the biggest ship. My thought was T3 cruisers, a slot for the mothership core and Titan core, one that combat over station. You know what's funny? Back in 2019, they were talking about how there was too many Titans, so they're going to introduce the concept of the Titan core, where in order to build a new Titan, you had to blow up a Titan. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, we entered into EU time zone, so it's possible that overnight people were not running the drifter sites. So now we're seeing people start to run the drifter sites for the day. So all of the influence drops down as we see how much decay has happened over the night. And now they're going up as people are running them. That's what I meant. So if they started running the sites an hour ago, then I would have noticed a big dip and then it climb up really fast because they've been running the Nexus site for the last hour. So yeah, they could run 3 sites in an hour. That's totally doable. That's true. One of the best ways that you can make sure to spend your Plex is support your Skinner creators by giving them Plex. I know it's tempting to buy skins with ISK, but it is so much better for your creators. If you like your Skinner creator, pay with Plex. There are Titan rats now. The Titan core thing could work. Yeah, and I've said that before, that they could introduce new Titan cores that way. Ironically enough, instead they introduced station cores with quantum cores. But that was basically what Titans were supposed to be. Back in 2019, at least. They're floating the idea back then. Maybe that was even 2016, now that I think about it. I don't remember. Anything else? I think that's it for today. We've already been going for a while, and I want to have stuff for all week. And so yeah, I guess I need a world. I want a world arc. I want a world arc. I want the world arc to be able to bridge. That's what I want. I like Uriel's old design for the world arc that doesn't have any weapon systems, but just deploys pylons like the real world arc does. But yeah. I will say, as a final plea, guys, like, if you can support the stream, please consider doing so. A like and a comment is enough. Like, that really helps. Share it with friends. But at the same time, as I said, I just lost my phone. I've been trying to deal with other stuff too. My finances have been very painful for the last couple of weeks. So, you know, consider helping out. If you like the channel, if it's been helpful to you, you can consider becoming a member, picking up some merch. But like I said, just liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel and sharing it with friends helps as well. I do want to give a very strong thank you to everyone who has supported me and continues to support me. It's what makes this possible. And I would like to continue to be doing it. So yeah, there's only 1/3 of the people have liked the stream. It's a huge deal. It's like, unironically, I could show you guys the numbers at some point, but like the difference between streams that get lots of likes and streams that don't get lots of likes, the amount of like people that it gets shared with is big. So yeah, you can always pick up merch like the t-shirts or the mugs or whatnot. Yeah, and you can also come and join us in game to help the Convocation of Empyreans. So got to hit more calls to action. Well, you know, that's what I'm saying. So, yeah, that's about it. Zori's over there sleeping. Thank you, Havoc. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to do stuff for you guys and, you know, whatever, but I've been doing a lot of, I mean, it's been a big period of transition for me. Yeah, and I'd like to continue to be able to do this with you guys and for you guys. So thank you guys all so much for your support. Yeah, and I will be back probably tomorrow. But I've been Ash Rothy. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put even to context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out and supporting the stream, liking, commenting, subscribing, all that stuff that I talked about earlier. Thank you guys so much. You guys are amazing. But I have been Ash Rothy, the voice of New Eden, and until next time, I'll see you in space. Where's my end? There it is.
Bring on the wrecking machine. For every city